That's not good. Better? Something missing. I know. That's it. We can start. Hello and welcome to the lesson which is replacing the one when we had trouble connecting. Today we're going to focus on two things, narrative tenses, and while we're at it, part of that is about talking of the continuous, and the question is, when do you use continuous and when don't you? Let's find out with this presentation. Now, for this presentation, there are two things which are important. One, you can find this presentation also on Smart School, and later we will be using the book and do a couple of exercises during the presentation. So please make sure you have your book and some paper and a pen ready. So narrative tenses, what are they? Well, we have discussed them, but we call them past tenses. And there's a reason for that. When you tell a story, you tell a narrative, and a narrative is meaning you are talking about past tenses. You don't tell stories about what's going on. You see this. So I would never tell a story. So today I'm going to tell you a story about what I'm doing right now. So what I'm doing right now is I'm making a presentation about English grammar. It's a presentation about narrative tenses. And I am using my PowerPoint and I'm using Zoom to record this lesson. All of this is obvious. You see this. You don't need to. These are not the stories you're interested in. If somebody would tell you a story like that, you would fall asleep, right? So the stories which engage you, the story which you find interesting, those are things that happened in the past to the person telling the story, and in most cases you weren't there. So this is very important to remember because this is why you tell a story. Past events, and you sort of tell them to this person. Now, sometimes when you're telling a story, you start, so, oh, did I never tell you about the time I did this? Well, this was going on. And then sometimes you need to tell about something which happens more in the past. And this is why you need your past tenses. All of your past tenses, basically there's 4 of them. So we have the simple past, we have the past perfect, and we have the continuous versions of both. So we're going to look at that today. So when you tell a story, you tell a narrative, you use narratives. And the difference between a story and a series of sentences is that your tenses will differ. This will make you understand what is going on as a listener. Do you sometimes get that feeling when you're watching a series and the people who made the series are trying to make you guess what's going on, and they do that by not telling you vital things from the plot? And then sometimes they don't tell this happened today and this happened yesterday. And in the end of the movie, you think, oh, now it makes sense, right? What they do is they don't give you the clues which we need to tell a good story. So tenses, they differ. You have to know what comes first in order not to confuse the listener or the viewer. And sometimes we use links, like in this case. We have links between the separate sentences. You can see 2 examples below. The second example I'm going to use first. I was listening to the radio while I was doing the dishes. Why are we using that? Well, there are 2 reasons why we're using was listening and was doing. First and foremost, we'll start with the last part of the sentence, the dishes, right? So if you do the dishes, sadly, this isn't very easy, right? So even if you have a dishwasher, you still need to load everything into the dishwasher. And once it's finished, you have to unload the dishwasher. So it takes some time. And if you don't have a dishwasher and you have to do everything by hand, it even takes more time and more effort. So this is something where we would use a continuous sentence to sort of make sure everyone who listens understands this is a long process. So if you stress the duration of an activity, it's a good time to use the continuous, in this case a past, because it happened in the past. Number two, I was listening to the radio. So this is sort of the same thing. You don't say, well, I like to hear some music. You turn on the radio and then you say, well, that was nice, and turn it off immediately. If you listen to the radio, you're there for a longer period. So was listening and was doing. Twice we use the continuous. And also there is a second clue, while. While is a linking word, and that means happening at the same time. So if you know that while means happening at the same time, it makes sense that the verb in front and the verb in the back are using the same tense, because, right, they're happening at the same time. So over to the second part. A couple came home to find their house had been burgled. That is the first example. Now, what came first? Two reasons. Again, there's a lot of two reasons today, but with good use today. So two reasons why this is correct. First and foremost, if there's a burglary, right? There's people, they're thieves who try to steal your stuff from your house. They're not going to do this when you're there. They're not going to say, hi, we just rang the door because we wanted to steal your television and your laptop. Could we do that right now? That's not going to happen, right? So they do this when you're not home. So when you have a sentence, a couple came home, that means before they were not there. An ideal moment for burglars to be there. So thinking about it just makes you realize which of those came first. But let's say you don't understand all of the words. You can still work out that the house being burgled happened earlier if you know your tenses, because this is, if you remember the timeline says the past perfect is happening more in the past. So past perfect and then a past tense. So understanding your grammar is quite important, and it makes you understand even the sentences you don't understand. Let's say there's a reading test, like an exam or a big reading test, where you have to say what happened first. Even if you don't know any of the words, you can still do it, because sometimes your grammar can help you. Now, the bad news for this is you need to understand the links between the sentences. You need to know these linking words, while, before, after, and also you have to have a good knowledge of your tenses, because without it, you're going to lose that extra bit of help grammar can give you. In other words, as it says down there, you have to know which tense to use when and how. Because most stories are not told chronologically, especially in films. If you watch a film or a series, in most cases, they're not going to tell you this came first and then that's how we go to the end. No, they tell a story in such a way you are more involved. You want to hear what's been going on, and also you want to be entertained. Basically, A, B, C, D up to Z is not the most entertaining way. So they'll start with something that really freaks you out or is really engaging, and then they'll go to a bit back in the story, and then they'll go back to the front, and they switch times, and they do this to keep you entertained. Now, if you know your tenses and this is happening in the story, a lot of the times you don't have any trouble. You know, oh, this is a flashback because I know my tenses. So it's very important to sort of know this. We're going to test this with a text which is coming up soon. So like I told you earlier, but don't worry, you get some time to pause the video. And if you don't have your pen and paper ready, get it later when we have the moment where you have to think. So in order to do that correctly, you have to understand the meaning of the verbs and the links between the verbs and the sentences. I gave you an example. When they get home, the back door smash and money and jewelry steal. Now, sadly, because this is an online lesson, the only people I can ask right now are over there. What do you think the answer is? Okay, good. But that's not too, well, quite useful for you. So I'm going to tell you what in the other classes and in previous years have been the most correct answer. So a lot of people say when they got home, you have to use got, right? Because we're talking about past tenses. And then they say the back door. And then some people say was smashed and money and jewelry had been stolen, or had been smashed and money and jewelry had been stolen. Now, why can you say had been smashed and was smashed for the door? Well, I'm gonna do this. So you see a door, right? So, oh, there's a door. Now, let's say I'm not going to smash the door, right? Because that will be, well, expensive for a lesson. And I don't think the school will refund me for that. But I'm going to do something else. I'm going to open it. So let's see. Right. So let's say it's not me, but the burglars were there and they opened the door, right? So when they got home, the back door was opened or had been opened. You can focus on two things. You can focus on the activity which I just did, which was opening the door. If you say, well, the activity of the door first closed and then opened, well, then you have to say the back door had been opened or had been smashed, right? Because that happened in the past. If you say, well, I know you mean that, but if you look at it right now, that door is still open, or in the sentence, the door is still smashed. Well, yeah, makes sense too. So in that case, you can say the back door was smashed or the back door was opened. So those are the important, well, moments where you can sort of still choose. But then the last one definitely has to be money and still, so that's going well. Money and jewelry had been stolen, or you could even say stolen if you say had been smashed. So these are your options. When they got home, the back door had been smashed and money and jewelry had been stolen. If you don't want to use had been too much, you could say when they got home, the back door had been smashed and money and jewelry stolen. Or number three, when they got home, the back door was smashed and money and jewelry had been stolen. So these three actions, I wanted you to sort of think, what did I mean? And this sometimes, it hasn't happened to you, but it has happened to other classes where I just asked them, what did you mean with that answer? And if a student can tell me, well, this is what I meant, and it's grammatically correct, but not the way I thought of the sentence, I will give you that point. In all fairness, right? You have a valid, you have a good understanding of that sentence. Not the sentence, I had it in my mind, but perfect nonetheless. So sometimes grammar can give you some options, but in most cases, just follow the rules. So what are we going to do right now? We're going to listen to a story. You can see the story over here, and I'm going to read it for you. So a couple came home at midnight to find their house had been burgled. You remember that sentence. Bob and Janet Gilbreth had left their house at 6 o'clock to go to the theater. When they got home, the back door had been smashed and money and jewelry stolen. A neighbor said that she had heard a loud noise at about 8 o'clock. Mr. and Mrs. Gilbreth, who moved to the house 5 years ago, told police they had seen a man who had been acting suspiciously for several days before the robbery and were able to give a description. The man answering the description was later arrested. So what do we have in this story? Well, you see the answer. When they got home, the back door had been smashed and money and jewelry stolen. That was one of the three options I said was a good answer. But also, you have a complete story. This is what we tell a story, right? It's full information. You get a bit of background about when they moved the house, what happened, they went somewhere, some burglars used that moment to get all the goods, money and jewelry in this case. By the way, jewelry, like you see it over there, that is the British spelling. Sometimes it's a bit shorter, it's missing an L and an E, that is the American spelling. So what I want you to do right now is, and I'm going to put a pause moment in this video. So pause the video there and then write the story in sentences from the beginning. So that's the thing that happened first up to the end, the thing that happened last, right? So no full story, just sentence after sentence, what came first up to what came last. And in the meantime, I'm going to close this door because it's late at night and it's a bit cold. And like I said, grab that pen, grab that paper, start and write everything from beginning to end. You'll see the correction in a short while, but it's important that you do this so I can give you feedback, even if it's in a video, of why you're doing it and what had to be the right reason. Oh, you're back already. Well, that's good. Well, we're going to continue in a second, but first I just wanted to show you what I was talking about. The timeline, like you see it right now in front of you, you have on the left, I had worked, and then you have I worked. So I told you, for new students who don't know our school, I always say simple present. I am your English teacher. Mr. De Winter was your teacher, and Mrs. Arts had been teaching you some of the sentences and tenses. So any new student at that point knows that first is Mrs. Arts, then Mr. De Winter, and then you get to me. So it's the same with this particular sentence. What you have on the left is the burglary of the house, and then next, later in the timeline, is the arrival. So that's what I was trying to say earlier, and we're going to go over to the other page, which we just had right now, and you should be able to see it right here. So this was a story. I asked you to tell me how everything worked chronologically, so from the beginning up to the end, and let's find out. This is what I have. So we're going to skip the first one, and then you get, well, I'll just read everything. Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert moved to the house 5 years ago. They saw a man acting suspiciously for several days before the robbery. They left their house at 6 o'clock to go to the theater. A neighbor heard a loud noise at about 8 o'clock. The back door was smashed, money and jewelry was stolen. The couple came home at midnight and they called the police and gave a description, and the man fitting the description was arrested. So that's everything in a chronological order. A couple of points where people sometimes ask me questions. Can you do first the back door was smashed and then the next sentence money and jewelry was stolen? Yes. Perfect. But you should find out that there's one thing, right? And that is all of these tenses, and you can see it on the next slide. Did you notice this? So the original story was like this. Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert told police they had seen a man who had been acting suspiciously for several days before the robbery and were able to give a description. And then in the second version, the one you had to prepare, and I hope you did that correctly, Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert saw a man acting suspiciously for several days. They told the police this. Do you see the difference? In the second one, it's just fact after fact after fact. So everything is in the simple past. There's no longer a connection. There's no longer a story. In the first case, the story which you had over here, this was a story. You can see it's sort of like, it's unlike this, which is a series of lines with bullet points. In this case, it's a full story. It's one paragraph. So now you need those tenses, and this is why we start using the past perfect and the past perfect continuous. I want to draw your attention to one particular sentence, and that is somewhere in the middle. You see Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert, who moved to the house 5 years ago. And that's the thing which is a lot more in the past than the rest of the story. So why is that a simple past and not a past perfect? The answer is it has nothing to do with the story. So it's totally unrelated. It's a fact, and past facts are in the simple past. So this is not part of your story, and that's why it can be different. Technically, if you would write Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert who would move to the house 5 years ago, also correct. But like I said, doesn't have anything to do with the burglary. If they moved 5 years ago or 6 years ago or 2 years ago or last month, does not change the fact that the house has been burgled. So, like I said, the chronological version and what I told you to notice. So we're now going to look at the 4 tenses which make up these narrative tenses, these past tenses. We have a simple past, we have a past continuous, we have a past perfect, we have a past perfect continuous. When are we using which tense? So let's say we're on a holiday and we're driving to the airport, right? So we're driving to the airport, we get there, and then we arrive at the airport, and then we check in, and then we leave on the plane, right? So it's action after action if you do that. If it's just action happening after an action, what you can do is you use the simple past. We arrived at the airport and checked in. So first this action, then the next action, then the next action. Consecutive actions in the past, actions happening after each other. Simple past. Number 2, the past continuous. Here we have a longer continuous past action which was in progress when another thing happened. The sentence I give you as an example here is, we were having dinner when the doorbell rang. Well, I always say, I hope when you're doing this that it usually takes a lot more time to finish your dinner than it takes for someone to ring your doorbell, unless it's someone who's just, ringing your doorbell for ages. In most cases, that's a shorter activity. So the longer activity will be in the past, in the continuous. We were having dinner, continuous, when the doorbell rang, a simple. And this is context-based. For instance, I'm looking right now for, let's say, my keys to open this door, and someone taps me on the shoulder, right? And the sentence would be, I was looking for my keys when someone tapped me on the shoulder. The looking for your keys is a longer activity than someone just doing this. So is it always the same thing? No, not necessarily. Let's go back to this door, right? And let's say this is the door to the classroom, and you're over here, you're waiting, and you are talking, and I arrive, and I said, while they were talking, I opened the door. Opening of the door is usually, in most cases, a bit shorter than you talking, as you know from being in a class. So it's always context-based. It can be the same verb, but because of the different context, it could be a different tense. Like I gave you the 2 examples, right? I was looking for my keys when someone tapped me on the shoulder, versus while they were chatting, I opened the door. Okay. Next up, the past perfect. This is in a way easier. An earlier thing in the past. At the airport, we noticed we had left our luggage at the hotel. And if you think back at our timeline, that makes sense, right? You have the fact where you are at the hotel. I'm going to go back to this. The left thing is you're still at the hotel. Then you leave your hotel to go, well, near to now. And that's where you arrive at the airport, and there you think, oh, damn, we forgot our luggage. So the other thing, the leaving your stuff at the hotel obviously happened sooner. Let's go back. Then we have a past perfect continuous. So is this different? Yes and no. It's the same principle. It happened more in the past, but in this particular case, you are focusing on how long something took. So let's say you're still on your way to the airport, you're driving, and suddenly you're, that's a weird sound. What's going on with the car? Oh, it's out of petrol. We had been driving for hours when we noticed a problem. So that means you're trying to say, well, it wasn't something that happened when we started the car. We actually had been driving for hours and hours before it suddenly that problem started to appear. So more in the past and also a longer activity. Okay, so the simple past, past continuous, past perfect, and past perfect continuous. These are the things you have to understand your narrative tenses. When I say narrative tenses, when I say past tenses, I want to see these four. And that brings us to the last bit of this PowerPoint presentation. When do you use a simple? When do you use a continuous? So like I already said, you use it to stress how long something is taking, but there's also another reason. And you can see it in this slide. You use a past perfect to show that an action took place before another action, but when do you use the continuous? Well, let's see in these two cases. The first one, she was crying because she had been reading a sad book. So this means that for someone who just sees her and she has all of these tears running down her face, and you think, well, obviously she cried. Why? Well, you can at this point see, well, grammar is going to help you. First, she reads a book, and then the book is so sad, it makes her cry. So she had been reading a sad book, and because of that, she was crying. So you now know which comes first and which comes second. So, but if you look at the sentence, she was crying because she had been reading a sad book, that is meaning there's a direct link between these two things. So like you see in the middle, a continuation of the activity. So the book is so emotional that she becomes sad, and because of the fact that she's sad, she starts crying. One thing leads to the other. There is a direct link from one activity to the other. In the second one, there is not necessarily that link. It's not a direct link. She didn't want to watch the film because she'd already read the book. So let's say she she is together with you and a couple of friends, and you're going to go to watch a movie, and you think, well, shall we watch this movie? And she's, no, not that movie. I've already read the book 2 years ago. There's not a direct link. It's not like she is still reading that book and then puts it away and says, well, I'm not going to watch that movie because I just finished the book. This could be years ago. There's no direct link. So this is one of the reasons why you can use a continuous. There's also something else which you can find in web links in Smart School, and it's a difference between state verbs and action verbs. If it's a state verb, it is something that is not, well, having any action, and you don't use a continuous. So those are the three reasons to use your continuous. Number one, longer activity and you want to stress the duration. Number two, there is straight continuation of the activity. And number three is, well, you can't use a continuous because some verbs are not like that. We're going to test this a bit more with one thing we have in our book, and I'm going to try and go to the book right now. So if you go to your page, like I said, we were talking about 0.2, fun and games, all about narrative tenses. If you look at the bottom of that page, it says grammar focus. And if you do that, you go all the way to the back. It says go to page 134. And if you thought, well, this was a bit too fast for me, the nice thing is it's a video so you can rewind it. But also, if you say, I want to hear it from a different source, you can find it at the back of your book. So from page 124, and later, you can find all the information. You can find when you have to use present tenses, where you have to use when you have past tenses. And also, as you can see, just above that, you have an extra exercise. So we're going to do this one. So let's have a look at this extra exercise. It's on page 125. And just a quick reminder, you can find the answers to these in Smart School as well. If you go to Documenten, it'll say Key to Unit 0, and there you find all these extra exercises. So we never have time to do these, but that's one of the nice things about the book. It gives you a couple of extra exercises if you just want to test yourself a bit more. As you can see, there are 6 sentences, and would you like, well, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to put up that pause video again. You try them, and then we'll go over the exercises and the answers. Because I could just tell you the answers, but then probably you wouldn't know if you had them correctly or if you had them correct or not. So you do them right now, pause the video, and then afterwards start the video again and see if you were correct. Page 125 in the book right now. All right, so here. So have you done that? 6 sentences. Did you do them? I went ice skating last weekend. It was the first time. Which one did you have? Tried or had tried or was trying? The answer here is I had tried. And the reasoning in this case is, well, I would ask you, have you ever tried ice skating? And you said, no, I never did, or I have never done that. Good. If you'd say, yes, I went ice skating last weekend. Before that, I hadn't tried it. So by doing it, you actually did it for the first time, right? So up to that point, you had never tried ice skating, but then you did it last weekend. Technically, if you say it was the first time I tried it, and you would say, well, I'm talking about the exact same moment. It was the first time I did do that. I can understand that. So this one of the moments where I said, sometimes I will ask for your opinion. And basically that's on a test, on an exam. I try and make sure that those aren't on the exam. 2, no, that you were moving abroad, that's news to me. I hadn't heard. So what you have here is that someone is talking to you and say, well, as you know, next year I'm going to move abroad. I'm going to move to another country. You're, whoa, I didn't know that, sorry. So you're now saying, well, I hadn't heard that up to the moment you told me, and you didn't tell me right now, you told me this like 20 seconds ago. And up to that moment, I never knew that information, so more in the past. I first prize in a chess competition won. Had won, or was winning. Well, this would be won, right? So this is a conversation where I would ask you, so are you good at chess? You say, well, I'm actually good at chess. Actually, once I won first prize. Moment in the past, nothing more in the past than that. Just right now, and then a moment in the past. The moment in this case is the moment where you were the winner of the chess competition. Number 4, I'm sorry, about something else. What did you say? And I think we would say B here as your only alternative. So this is a story where someone is talking and suddenly you have to think of something else. And because of that, you were thinking of something else and you didn't hear that particular part. So you sort of drifted away for a moment and you want to say, well, it was not just like a moment, because that can happen. Sometimes you just don't hear a word and you say, sorry, what was that word? But if you completely miss a longer period, you would say, sorry, I was thinking about something else. What did you say? This implies to the listener, to the other a person that you missed a lot of information. I broke a bone once. My bike and crashed into a tree. So this is, let's say, a story about you breaking your bone, right? Doesn't matter which bone. Once you broke a bone. Now, how is this happening? What is the background? And for backgrounds, what do we use? We use the continuous. So let me tell you about the time I broke my bone. So I was riding my bike and suddenly I crashed into a tree, and that's when I broke my bone. And now we have finally number 6. Had he ever a basketball team before he took on the school team? So we have a sentence here, right? We have took. That is a past tense, but we also have before. So that means we have to use a past tense. Now it's being helped already because it said had. So on the test, probably you would also be missing that had, and you would have to give me had. Now, had is a past, well, it's a past perfect or a past perfect continuous. So you're either going to say coach or been coaching. So you can't say be. If you have be, go back and look at what you can use together. So it's either had he ever coached it or had he ever been coaching. And let's say what they say is, had he ever coached that? Was there a moment where he did that, right? And you can't say been coaching in this case because there's no context between the first sentence and the second sentence, if you remember that from the crying. So she had been reading a book, and because of that, she started crying. So there's a direct link. There's not like he had been doing this when suddenly he went to another team. It was not like suddenly, all of a sudden, someone put a bag in front of him or over his head and then abducted him to the new team. So it was not, there was no direct link. So that's why I would say had he ever coached rather than had he ever been coaching. You could say it in a sentence. So he had been coaching that other team for quite a while, but then something happened, and because of that, he now went to another team. But that's a different story. And that's not the story we're interested in. In this case, that's not the story we got. So I hope this, in a way, helped you understand the difference between the narrative tenses as well as the difference between when to use the continuous. That was the storyline for today. And like most stories, they end by saying, well, and that's it. See you next time. So I guess that's all for me to say right now. That's it for today. See you next time. Bye-bye.